You're starting? Great. Good evening. Good evening. Sun streaming in the window. Maybe a rainbow will appear. Welcome to subtropical New London. Thank you. This is the July 31st meeting of the New London Housing Commission. We have lots to accomplish today. We have our consultants from Steve Whitman and his group from Resilience Planning and Design, and a full house. With respect to governance and voting, should we need to do any, I would ask that Tom Vanata, if you would, and Amy and Steve Theroux, if you would act as voting members of the commission. Would you do that? I won't swear you in. You just said you can just say yes. And Amy over there, right. Thank you. We have meeting minutes of June 11th. They were not submitted to you earlier, so if you would like to defer voting on them or commenting on them, I think that probably is advisable. I have read through them, but not critically, but I would also thank the staff of New London for providing them, because I know how much work that takes with all the committees. And we're moving pretty fast. We've got some exciting things going on with the grant and the work we're doing, and it's a lot to keep up. So I respect immensely and appreciate those who work hard to make this happen, including one gentleman sitting next to me. I would just note quickly, I read through these and also look at my own notes before each meeting to see what I may have missed or what we're not thinking about or what we might think about in the future. And just note that a couple of comments that were made, and I was reminded in the minutes that Nancy Rollins made a good point. She said we need to understand the difference of the forms of housing options, including the definition of workforce housing. And that was a good point, and something I think we need to keep on our to-do list. There are a number of good points, but these just jumped out at me. Adam had suggested maybe a video with some storytelling, which could be good. So I know it's hard to ask people, and it's uncomfortable for folks who may not be volunteering already in this issue to be on a video to talk about themselves. So I would ask you to keep in mind, if you're talking to different people about the housing situation or their particular situation, if you think they might be really helpful and would participate in a video or storytelling, let me know, and I can help you make the ask, or you can make the ask. But it's something to keep in mind as we talk to people and meet them in various places. I talked to a young man who I could follow up with and might be a possibility. Nice guy, one child, single parent, and in New London, trying to figure out where he's going to live next month because he was given notice that the house is being sold. So that's the story that we hear time and time again. So we will defer the review and vote of the June 11th minutes, and we will move to the HOP grant discussion planning, which is with our colleagues at RP&D, which I've abbreviated RP&D now. It's just it's nice and long. The first thing to discuss was, I've forgotten who was it on the commission mentioned, I'm sorry, but said, gee, why don't we have a sort of a elevator speech or a short statement as to what this project is. And RP&D did a draft that was in bullet point. I was thinking of it being a little more prosaic, more kind of 2 or 3 sentences that we could all remember. But I'm also, when I get later on, I'm going to send their format of it, which was more bullet point driven, so that it could help any of us if we're stopped at Hannaford's or wherever we may be. You may be thinking in terms of bullet points as opposed to the prose. The prose might be usable in any number of places. So this is just in draft form. It was a great idea. I'll pass those out. Oh, here, the top one's mine. It's got my initials on it. Thanks. And there's some extras for you folks. Thank you for attending. I'll just read it to you. It, again, is nothing magic, and I have no literary license whatsoever. And I'm also not proud of my writing necessarily, so if there's some way we can make it better, please speak up. You'll see that I dropped one of the logos we'll be discussing later in the upper corner just to see how it would fit and what it is. But it says New London Housing Commission, New Hampshire Housing Finance Housing Opportunity Planning Grant. The town of New London has recently received a Housing Opportunity Planning Grant, HOP, from the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority in the amount of $103,000. Over the next year and a half, this funding will provide a valuable opportunity to study existing land uses, demographics, and existing housing types, and will lead to a number of public events for the review and discussion of these findings with the town residents. Working with professional planners, the Commission will conduct this study and engage community members in forums to consider the present conditions and determine desired regulatory and non-regulatory approaches to addressing the need for middle market housing in the town. Please join the Housing Commission and help determine the paths forward. So I use the term middle market instead of workforce because that seems to be a little more, more inclusive, a softer term. So anyway, please, unless something hits you at the moment you think needs to fit better or needs to be changed, any suggestions? Anything that hits you the wrong way or the right way or? Okay, well, you'll see a big draft stamp on the top of that. We'll keep working on it. Next is the outreach and engagement plan. I'm going to turn that over to our friends at Resilience. And did we get copies? Yeah, there are copies right there for you. It's the table that looks like this, has green blocks on it. I have a few extras. You guys have yours, right? Okay. Everybody have one there?
No, I don't either.
You don't? There you go. And did you get one of these? Epstein's, Pierre? Mike, did you get one of these? One of these? Thank you. There you go. This is a pretty important graphic, except I just gave you mine.
Just to remind folks is that microphones are really important tonight because Jen's doing the minutes from recording.
Mike, Steve, is there an extra one there? Oh, yeah. Thanks. I should have it memorized. Thank you very much. Thanks. And I'll turn it over to you, Steve, and your colleagues. And Liz, okay? Terrific.
Great. So what you have in front of you is a draft outreach and engagement plan for the HOP project. I do want to note that there's a little footnote at the bottom of the page. This document is really focusing on the outreach and engagement components of the project, and will continue to be a living document and updated as we go. And so I'll always date them so that you know that you have the most recent version if we end up making changes to this based on our conversation tonight. But really what we did was we took a lot of what we talked about during our last meeting together and used that as a way to build out this plan. And essentially it has a list of outreach techniques and then the outreach events listed on the left-hand column of the spreadsheet. And then we have information about, who will be responsible for each of the activities. And so you can see that there's a mix between us, town staff, some places where the commission is, we're asking for some help and assistance there. And then kind of broad timelines of each of the outreach activities on the right-hand side. So more by season. This gives us some flexibility to make more detailed decisions about the timing of some of these as we go, and as we begin to schedule the speaker series, which a lot of these outreach activities will be kind of organized around the time frame for those. Was this sent out in advance by just?
No,
okay,
it was
great.
not.
So this
I'm
is the
sorry.
first. So I'll go through this broadly with you all, so you know what's present.
Thank you.
So if we look at the outreach techniques, this really includes all of the mechanisms that we'll be using to get the word out to the community about the different speaker session events that are happening, about the initiative in general. And so this includes a project webpage on the Town of New London website, and we're in process with staff in putting that together. It will include a project description. It will include all of the relevant documents that we're putting together, the materials from these meetings. It'll be basically a storing place for anything related to the project that people can access and learn about. The New London HOP logo, that's one of the items that we're talking about tonight. So we brought you 3 different versions that we're asking you all to consider and provide some feedback on that will help serve as the kind of umbrella brand for the project. We've also developed a draft project feedback form, which is basically just a place for any member from the public to submit questions or comments about the project. We'll monitor that regularly. If there are questions that come in that can be easily addressed by staff, we'll work with staff to do that. Otherwise, we'll bring them to these meetings to make sure that the process is really transparent and that, you know, anyone who's submitting something is going to make sure that it's heard by the town. We'll also be producing a variety of different flyers and postcards and announcements that will be really getting the word out about each of the 3 speaker sessions. And so you'll see some of those materials start to come up in some of the meetings over the next couple months as we begin thinking about the first speaker session and how we're going to get the word out to people within the community. Some of the other techniques that are included here include direct communications to all of the boards, the committees, some of the organizations within that operate within the Town of New London. And so we'll provide content and hopefully you'll be able to help us get connected to some of those entities beyond those that are linked directly to the town. And then social media communications will be part of this. And so whether it's having the flyer image be able to be posted, you know, through that mechanism and other speaker session details, et cetera. We also made sure that we included reference to I believe it's the Town Shopper, the Intertown Newsletter, some of those places that we know that people are getting their news from. And so we'll work with staff to produce some content to make sure that the project is getting out through those avenues as well. One thing I did want to point out is that we did include, as part of the plan, one of the ideas that came up during the last meeting, which was those short interview videos, or even just like, even if it's not a video, capturing some quotes from short interviews of people who are directly impacted by the housing crisis in New London, as being a really compelling way to make the housing issues that are present in town alive and real. And so we made sure to include that and mention it within this plan as well. And then also some of your more kind of traditional media of local newspapers and things like that as being a mechanism for getting the word out. So that's the kind of synopsis of the outreach techniques. And so those are really going to help us advertise each of the 3 speaker sessions, which are outlined under the outreach events category of the plan. And so you'll see that those are spaced out in fall 2024, in winter 24-25, and then in spring 2025. We did also include one of the ideas that came up at the last meeting, which was kind of promoting these watch parties of, whether it's a homeowner who wants to invite a group of residents to their house and watch the recording and discuss those issues. And so we can get creative in how to best promote that idea, because that might require a little bit of planning on our part. All of this will require some additional planning, but this is sort of a broad overview of what we're thinking as far as public engagement for this process. So this is a really good time to get feedback from all of you, since we're right at the beginning, and let us know if this reflects back what our discussion during the last meeting, if we're missing anything. So we'd love to hear from you on that.
So, I'll go back to, yeah. So I'll go back to my comment about messaging and language.
Yes.
Again, I continue to hear from different people in town who don't understand what workforce housing means. And then, that said, I'm a little concerned, although I don't have a problem with it, if we're now changing the vernacular to middle market. We still need to have, I think, a concrete definition that is almost like our mantra, so that we're all saying the same thing and stating that. Because people, I think, are still confusing it with Section 8 and with several, other housing conundrums. So there's that piece. The other piece is that, and I just wonder, so in this, we talk about, the focus of the HOP grant and seemingly where the Housing Commission is at this point is looking at present conditions and so forth, but really to address the need for middle market housing, i.e. workforce housing. Yet in here, we are talking about, and I remember us having this conversation about visioning what type of housing is needed. I don't know if that will be confusing to people or, at one point, we have talked several times about the need for a discussion about a housing continuum. But if the HOP grant and whatever is focused on that, I just don't want to mix up things. And so then again, people are confused. Doesn't take much, including me, to be confused about all this language. So I think it's important that we sort that out sooner than later.
It's good points. I think the direction we were headed in to try to add clarity to that is that the research that's being done on the demographics and land uses and values of real estate, et cetera, will lead us to understand where housing is needed, what type of housing is needed, not what type, what economic range of housing is needed. And then we can figure out now or then too what to call it. But it's in the middle price range is what we've known so far. And we've called it workforce housing. It's also called middle market housing. There probably are a number of other names, and we should align our definitions and wording so that it does become a mantra. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, and one of the items I wrote down when this was first brought up as far as the kind of different definitions and vernacular was that we could have on the website some kind of like frequently asked questions area that just says like what is workforce housing, and we can bring those definitions to you all to make sure that it's vetted by the group, because there are a lot of different definitions out there and we want to make sure that we're tailoring it in the most appropriate way for New London. So we can bring that to all of you for the next meeting.
And that we're all in agreement
Exactly.
with
Yeah.
what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, agreed.
Okay.
So as far as the timing of that, it might not be the next meeting. But, because we're waiting on some of the research from RKG, because one of the things that we found helpful in the communities is that description of workforce housing, when you put a dollar amount to it, when it says, it's a household making $90,000 a year who can afford this much for housing, it is eye-opening if it's related to the community. But I do think, as Liz said, we can define it, we can provide some New London-specific numbers, and I think describing both, because they do overlap quite a bit, the missing middle housing and the workforce housing, and that middle section is really wide. It goes to some pretty high-end real estate and to some pretty affordable real estate, and we can do that with Eric's numbers.
And I'm wondering if in that presentation or discussion, because I know that sometimes when we start talking numbers, everyone's eyeballs start rolling in their head. But if we said, okay, middle housing or workforce housing is this range, and by the way, in this area, this is what the average teacher makes. This is what the average nurse or doctor or fill in the blank makes. So people are beginning to understand, oh, these are the folks we're trying to target, and this is who we're talking. So it starts making the people behind that definition real. I think that would help.
I'm going to, I'm going to jump in and say that that's really important. I had a person come and say they did not qualify for workforce housing up in Lebanon. And were they going to qualify for it here? They don't understand how they get to how you qualify for workforce housing. I was surprised they didn't qualify.
It's my understanding that there's already a definition for workforce housing, but we're not trying to redefine that.
Right.
So by saying middle, I think that conflict is sort of talking what Nancy's saying. To me, the middle compounds the issue. I mean, everybody knows, well, probably nobody knows what it is, but workforce housing is well-defined by the state and the government. So I think we wrap around that definition. Middle, to me, sort of gets nebulous and ambiguous. And what's middle? I mean, you know, it can be a...
Yeah, I don't have an answer for it. I think it's a really good point. And if it's a little muddled for us, it's going to be even worse for the community. So I get it. I mean, I know the concept of middle market, but you're right. And Steve, you just said for the first time they overlap a little bit, but they're not the same. And
Along with that,
you're using a microphone? Thanks. Yeah.
yes, can you not hear me?
I can now.
Do you need to be closer? What I was going to say is, just jumping off of what Nancy said, if somehow we are explaining to people the kind of role, the kind of position, job that someone has, and this is what they can afford, it looks like this. The number that they can afford is X, it looks like Y. And then we have, you know, whatever the professions are, then somebody has a visual of what that person is doing, what that person can afford, what that person's options are for housing. Whether they're available or not is not what I'm saying. I'm just, for a definition's sake, somebody has to have a visual of, as you mentioned, it's a nurse, it's a teacher, it's a professor. Somebody has to have that visual with a corresponding amount of income. It can't just be, because I know Peter has said this many times, the state has, it's the median income between X and X. You know,
Right.
where I live now, there's a sign on a bulletin board that says that Twin Pines Housing came and explained what their project is about and how it's for median income. And I'm thinking, nobody knows what that is. You're already advertising, and it's not even the Housing Commission, and nobody knows what that is, median. And then maybe it has a number and a number, but those numbers don't really mean anything. That might be your gross income, but it's based on something else. Nobody wants to be in the weeds. You just want to know, it looks like this, here are the options. Does any of that make sense to people?
Yeah, and I think maybe what we could do is reach out to the school district and get some average salaries for starting, and then, 10 years experience, and do that at the hospital. This is statistical data. We obviously can't breach privacy, but get some numbers from employers. And we've seen the numbers from Hannaford's, because they're looking for a lot of help. So anyway, maybe we get some real data there.
So, speaking of getting in the weeds, my only fear is for tonight, we have a lot of other stuff we want to cover with you. I think everything you're saying, we're going to get to, and we're going to get to some of this in the next couple of meetings leading up to that speaker series, because it's either going to be part of the content that we're going to want to present and we're going to want you to vet it, or it's going to be part of maybe some of the messages we want to put out through all these various techniques that Liz just went over. So we just want to know if we're missing any of the various ways. We want to use as many different ways so that people see this at least 3 times and they recognize something's happening on a November day and that they have an opportunity to attend, and they may choose to or not. But at least, are we going in the right direction with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
And it's not that I want to kill conversation. I just want to make sure that we get through the stuff that we need to tonight.
Yes, good. Thank you for keeping us moving. The one thing I would want to just put a flag to come back to later on is the concept of social media. We do not have a web page, a Facebook page, to my knowledge, and I think that's right, Adam. We don't have Twitter or, so far, the town has not done that. We being the town, yeah. So, and that brings in a whole suite of business questions, so we need to come back to that.
Okay. Great. Next slide. Okay. So we have created a few different draft logo options that we brought here to discuss with you all tonight. There are slight different variations on each of these logos, including names and also just some graphic differentiations. And so in your packets, you have these same 3 images. They're bigger, so you should be able to see them pretty clearly. But we just want to get your initial feedback, and what we really want to do is come away from this meeting with some clear direction. So if it's a combination between any of these options, if there is something that just doesn't work, if there's one that stands out as a really clear preferred option, that's what we want to come away from tonight.
Remembering, this is not a logo for the Housing Commission. This is a
Right.
logo
Yep.
this is a logo for the project.
Yep, exactly.
And so it'll appear, as you saw in that draft, I just grabbed one and plugged it in to see what it would look like, that draft project statement. Anybody have any preferences?
I like the one with 2 houses.
Yep, that was also, yep, we've heard that before, so that's great.
I like
We
that
got-
one too. Anybody
Yeah,
else?
we've got 2 so far.
So we're going to stop referring to this as HOP? I mean, this.
Well, we
People identify, what is this a logo for?
this is for the project, so it will be Homes Today and Tomorrow, funded by the HOP grant.
Project,
Funded by the HOP.
this whole project.
Yep.
Yeah, and we
I
can,
was
we can
thinking,
state that.
one more thing that we're throwing out there for another name.
Yep.
And what happened to HOP, you know?
Right.
We just stop talking about HOP and say
Yep.
Homes,
homes.
yep.
Anybody else?
I like the paths home, but I'd prefer it with the second house.
Okay, that's good to know. I'm curious to know if anyone else echoes that statement.
I do.
Meaning you like the logo of the one that says paths?
The
You just want
name.
a second house?
Yeah,
I like
with the
this
second-
whole thing,
yeah.
Okay.
just can you have a second house
Yep.
like the other one has?
Yep. That's easy. If everyone else feels the same way.
Oh, you do?
I mean, this, I'd like a second house too.
Yeah, it's a cleaner look, I agree.
Than both of these to me.
Yeah.
Okay, paths or just Homes Today and Tomorrow?
No,
Paths.
paths home.
Paths Home.
With
Paths
another house.
With
the
another
second
house.
So I like the one with the 2 bumps because Kearsarge has 2 bumps.
Well,
bumps?
that too.
Two
That's-
And the cloud over in the sky sort
Yep.
of breaks it up.
Wait, which one is 2 bumps, Ann? Sorry.
The one with 2 bumps is the Homes, the one on the right.
Maybe we could do,
Oh, maybe the bump in the back could be a little more obvious?
what if you put the paths home on the one with the 2 bumps and the 2 houses?
We can do that easily. These are things that are easy to
You're
do on our end. Yep.
Okay,
I kind of figured that this was what was going to end up happening, was kind of a merging, so we're right where I thought we'd be.
so we're merging the logo, I'm just trying this out. We're merging the logo that has the 2 houses on it
Yep,
with the mountain that it has 2 humps.
yep.
But we're going to change the title to be Paths
Paths Home.
Home.
I'm not saying that's the be-all and the end-all, but it'd be neat to see that. I like that,
Yeah.
2 homes, I like the mountains correctly.
Yep,
And
I-
it's a
this-
And the Paths Home title
cluttery to
resonates.
me.
Yeah, that's
Perfect,
cluttery
great.
to me, too.
So
That's
we
just
we can eliminate that one and work
Okay.
with the other 2.
Both of these homes today and tomorrow are cluttery.
Okay.
The paths.
okay, so we like the logo, the wording Paths Home. Yeah,
I do.
it's simple.
Yep.
How's that sound? We're good, okay, so you're going to make that revision? and we'll-
That's very clear, thank you, I really appreciate
That's
the
amazing. Can we get a
crisp
motion?
feedback.
All right, we're moving on.
That was really good, thank you.
Going once, going twice.
Okay,
I don't know
next.
if
Terrific.
everyone agrees, though.
They're not speaking against you.
There you go.
We also need to think ahead to setting the date for the first speaker series. And Adam had been kind enough to reach out to Colby Sawyer, and I believe they said there were 2 dates, the 13th and the 20th of November. These are dates we had tried out before at our last meeting. They said that that would work. They asked me what time, or asked Adam what time, and I said, I don't know, we don't know yet, but we're thinking in the evening. I think that's still the plan, is that, but we can refine that. That is a weekday. That's a Wednesday? Hold on.
It is, Thanksgiving's late this year, so.
And,
I was just going to say that Thanksgiving is late this year, so the 20th is the week prior to Thanksgiving. Didn't want anyone thinking that's the next day.
right, good point, good point. So is there any preference? My suggestion is sooner is better than later, because we have lots to do in a time frame. So if the 13th seems to be okay with you, Marilyn?
I have no idea about the 13th, but the question I have is just having these kinds of meetings, is there better attendance during the day, earlier in the day, or after dinner, before, I mean, it's dark then, right? The time has changed, is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
And I was thinking of the numbers of people that come to the New London thing, and that's 8:30 in the morning.
The morning, the gatherings.
I just don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
the answer. I'm just asking.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly have been well attended. I think largely it probably is the same crowd that would be willing to attend each. I think it does sort of cut off the ability for a younger demographic to attend if we're trying to go that route. The question is, will they attend if we have it later too? And it's probably hard to answer.
Well, later they're doing dinner and bedtime and all that kind of stuff. So you can't, I don't know the answer,
Yeah.
but it's just a question.
Do you guys have any input on that
Yeah.
from other towns? What?
You want to go first? I'll piggyback off you.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we had this conversation before, in the end, we settled on probably our best bet was an evening wheat time. Whether or not you do it at like a 5 o'clock and people come from work and they're starving during it and then they go home and eat, or whether you push it a little later so people have a chance to eat is really up to you and what you see working here in the community. If you do it a little earlier, it's not as dark and you might be able to split the difference. But-
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest reasons is that it does literally allow the broadest demographic of people to attend, and I agree, I think you don't know if you're going to get that diversity, but it does allow for that.
I also think that the college has the ability to record it, and so probably
Yes.
the way that we're going to reach the sub 50 crowd is they're going to watch it recorded later anyways.
Right, right.
I think that's probably the way most of
Yep.
them are taking in their public. I'm trying to think when we had Rick Stockwell and that crowd in the panel, that was at like 5-ish, I think. I mean, it was earlier than,
What time of year?
I thought it was a similar time of year, like late fall.
Yeah, isn't the fall sometime?
It was fall, right?
I mean, we do have some budget for some snacks and things too that,
Yeah.
I mean, that can help to sort
In
of
the
tide
hop
people
grant, we
over.
have those.
That was very well attended,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's what we're looking for.
Yep. Yeah, just to stress Adam's point, as part of this, the grant funding is we have money for refreshments and, some goodies to keep people's sugar level high enough they chip in.
So, in thinking about this, one of the things that we'll want to talk about, I think, next month, when we talk more details about the event, is how we're going to engage people as they come in and how we want to engage people as they go out. And one of the things we want to do as they come in is they're not going to have any data, they're not going to have any of the context of the meeting. So we want to ask some very broad, basic questions, but they could be doing that while they're having a snack and talking to neighbors. And so there could be a half hour or an hour that's kind of open. We're signing people in, we're giving them food, they're giving us some feedback. Half hour may be enough. Then the presentation, and then there'll be a way that we're going to want to collect some information from them on the way out. And they'll either be able to do it real time, or we'll set something up online and they'll have the alternative of going home and giving it some thought and providing feedback. So just to give you a sense, it probably is a couple of hour event overall, with a little bit of wiggle room on the front and the back for some feedback.
Could I just add, I'll try to take my resilience hat off and put my hat on as someone who has a young child, to whomever's point it was. The morning would be a challenge, I think. But to Steve's point, the idea of, even if I can't make the entire meeting, if I could come, meet some people, have some idea of what's going on for half an hour, and I don't know if it was talked about, to have some sort of sheet with some facts, bullet points that I could take home and look at later, that might help, younger demographic who can't make it for the entire thing, but to at least attend for a part of it and come, leave with some amount of information.
So just to make a point, last year, we did it on November 15th at 5 o'clock.
Nice.
Okay.
Good detective work.
Wow, yeah. That's funny.
Well, so then perhaps I'm hearing start at 5 o'clock, program 5:30 to 6:30, and then half hour to survey afterwards. And does that sound good?
How do you do that? How do you do it after, this could probably go to another time, but I can see people going out, and do you stop each person to talk to them about, or do
No.
you give them something to fill out?
Yeah, it'll be much more, they'll be able to engage with the material and choose if they want to or not. So we won't have to go talk to every person.
Yeah,
I think
see them.
we probably want like an hour and a half for the program, because I think between a little bit of an introduction about what's going on in the project, and then content from both Zach and Eric, which you're going to be seeing, we're going to have to really pick and choose the pieces we want to share so that it's not overwhelming people, it's digestible. And then some kind of Q&A so that people have, they're going to be thinking, they're going to have ideas, they should have a way of sharing those ideas, at least, even if we can't get to all the answers. And then, so an hour and a half probably, and then, you know, some kind of, it'd be nice to have a cocktail hour after, but some kind of like debrief, we get people's feedback, and they can have the remaining cookies on the way out the door.
So do we think 5 o'clock is too early to start?
No, I just,
No?
5:30 to 7 maybe for the actual program, and then get them out the door by 7:30. And as Zach said, people can grab materials and leave whenever,
So the program is 5 to 7:30,
30. Yes, say 7.
including the 30 minutes in advance. So start at 5 o'clock.
Not everybody gets there at 5 o'clock,
Right.
right? We know that.
Yeah, it's true.
So,
Right. Right, and people are working, 5 o'clock, they have to get there. Sure, I get it. Any other thoughts? So 13th sounds good. Time frame we just discussed. Adam, would you be so kind as to thank Colby Sawyer very much? And then we can talk with them about what sort of refreshments and things we'd like, and we can put that in our budget. Okay, terrific. Next is the project website coordination. If you've had a chance, I did some screen captures. If you look on the town website under the Housing Commission, you will see these things. Except you won't see the last page on that is a questionnaire form that Liz sent as a draft for you to look at as well. But the first two sheets, I have extras too, but if you look at the website, you'll see it. The first one is the Housing Commission page. I just took a screenshot. And if you look on the left-hand side, it says Housing Opportunity and Planning Grant. Then you click on that, and that takes you to the next page, or the next electronic page, and that says Project Kickoff Presentation, May 9th Grant Agreement, and the HOP contract. So it's already in place, it's connected, and that will be our repository. Obviously, it's just the skeletal start, but we can put text and updates and newsletters, and we have a start to it. I think that's managed by the town, correct, Adam?
Correct. Yep. So the staff in the front office downstairs, I mean, they'll manage the website, and we'll coordinate with them to get everything on. And
Okay. Any thoughts?
so does that mean that on your first page where it says Housing Opportunity and Planning Grant, if we're in agreement about what we're calling the project, that would be removed and edited? Okay.
With our new logo.
Yeah, and we'll do the same.
Yes,
with
sir.
the Project Feedback Home, we'll replace it with the Paths Home title and finalize that.
I want to remind ourselves also that by our agreement under this funding, we need to continue to alert the public that this is funding from New Hampshire Housing Finance.
Right, right.
So doesn't need to be on that page, but the next link should say New Hampshire Housing Finance HOP grant somewhere, because we need to acknowledge that.
Yep. And I think it should also be on this, at the bottom.
Yes.
So that'll start tying together, you know, that it's the
Okay.
HOP
Yeah.
grant, oh, that's what it's funding, blah, blah.
We
Yeah.
can do that.
Like, just very
Doesn't have to be.
funded by,
Yeah.
There you go.
funded by.
Yep,
So
that's good.
people know immediately, oh, that's where the money comes from.
Yep.
Great.
And then that's just so you can see what's already in place. Then the last page is the questionnaire form that Liz created. That is good, it's open. Where does this information or this question go?
So essentially, it all funnels into a spreadsheet. So it's like a live spreadsheet that we have access to and that we will provide, most likely, Peter and Adam, just to you both. And so you can also see it being updated in real time if anyone submits a question or comment. And we'll just make sure that we're monitoring it, weekly or so, so that any questions or comments that come up, we can make sure that we're addressing them. None of the fields in the form, so name, email address, none of them are required. So people don't have to put their name if they don't want to. They can put as much information as they feel like, so it can be anonymous. But we'll make sure that the commission gets access to that. But it's at least just a place where anyone can, if they have a thought on the future of housing for New London, they can put it somewhere and know that it's being heard at any point in the project, even beyond the speaker sessions.
The only thought that came to my mind is, would this be a place where somebody might say, hey, I need some housing? Do you have a 2-bedroom available starting in September, And so I think we somehow need to make it clear that this is not a listing agency service. This is a conceptual questions, right?
But it would be kind of cool, because then we would have immediate feedback of people going,
Maybe one of the questions could be, are you in need of immediate housing or something like that? So that you knew what type of person was, even if they didn't put their name or anything, what kind of person was interested in asking questions and stuff.
Yeah, a good point.
But what are you going to do with that?
I don't know, they're going to get it. That's what they said.
I will
What are we going to do with it?
Well, it tells us the person leading the question, asking the question, tells us their point of view.
Yep.
Are they looking for housing, and are they in that type of position? Do they have housing? Are they just a concerned citizen?
I wouldn't put too much emphasis on the feedback form. They're helpful, especially like if you were to attend a meeting and you don't have a chance to really share your full thought, there's a place you can go and you can provide, I was at the meeting, here are the thoughts I wanted to express, or I've thought about it since. But we don't see a ton of traffic. Like if we get a dozen people that use it over the course of a project, that's probably about normal. But it just provides, it's a pressure relief valve for somebody who's really got something that they're excited about or concerned about, to be able to make sure that it gets to you.
Yeah, that there is a mechanism and way that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things we didn't touch on the outreach plan at the very bottom was put in here, the reporting.
Yes,
So
thank you.
whether it's from the speaker series, the information we collect from folks, or through this feedback form, or through any of the other means, we're collecting that information and we're creating a report over the course of this project so that you can show, well, we heard from this many people, or we did all these different things and we only heard these requests for housing.
Yeah, and it will include a summary of what's been heard. That's like an abbreviated kind of version, and also just all the raw comments. So they're all there, and people will be able to see like the breadth of information that was collected, the different opinions, perspectives, and they're going to be informing the process. So.
Any other thoughts, questions? Yep. Okay, I think this would be a good time to sort of stop for a moment and actually take a formal vote. We've taken this wonderful opportunity of a HOP grant and funding to employ some great consultants and to think about how we're going to engage in the community, the forums, the information, the data. But now is a good time, I think, to stop for a moment and say, let's make a vote and ask ourselves, is this where we want to go? Because there's a lot of work and a lot of exciting information and a lot of engagement that will lead us to some interesting and important conclusions. But I think we should take a vote. So I will entertain a motion if somebody is so moved.
Is on the current.
I would say on
Are we in
the
agreement
program.
with the current direction of where we are with the HOP grant?
Correct. The
Here's-
program's been set forth
Okay.
in graphics form on schedule. We have sessions that are generally mapped out. This first one has been set with a date specific, at least for now. And of course, lots of work to be done along the way. But I'd like to entertain a motion that sets us on the right course formally.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
So
Second.
moved, and it's been seconded. Any thoughts? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Thank you. We're on our way. And thanks to Resilience Planning and Design.
Absolutely.
Next is Zach and his spatial discovery presentation. Thank you.
All right. I said to Peter and Adam and others that this room is becoming quite comfortable, so I'm glad to be back. Thanks for having us back again. And before I get into this stuff, for folks that need to crane their necks or change seats or do whatever you need to, please. None of this would have been possible without the prior phase of this, previous to the HOP grant. So I just want to let you all know, we've dug into this stuff in a great amount of detail. And none of it would have been possible had the town not taken the steps and efforts that they did all those months ago. So I just want to put that out there. Before I jump in, I just want to review the 3 phases of this larger project. Right now, we're in this discovery phase, but we do have that visioning and pathways phase still to come. And we talked about that at the last meeting. In this discovery phase, we have 4 tasks. Really, tonight, we're talking through those first 2. Liz has already talked about task 1. It's now my role to talk through task 2, which is this GIS baseline understanding of town and spatial data. So I'm going to get us started with some basic information. We've got the town boundaries. We have all of the available parcels and lot lines in the town. Just to start out with some, again, really basic information. How big is New London? Total acreage is over 16,000 acres. A lot of the times, we're working in towns and cities, municipalities that don't necessarily have a lot of water bodies. New London does. So it was important to remove water from the equation. So when we're looking only at land acres, we've got a little over 14,000 acres of actual land in town. Just for some comparisons, looking at the amount of water in town, New London, looking at the surrounding neighboring towns, New London has the second highest percentage of water, second only to Sunapee, which has 16%. So New London actually has less land acreage as a percent than almost all of the surrounding towns. I'm going to talk us through this workflow of this analysis that I've gone through. Before I do, this whole process, this analysis is designed to give us all a baseline understanding of information about New London that'll hopefully help us guide growth and ultimately housing decisions in town. Before any decisions are made, before any more votes are cast, it's helpful to understand the current state, the current existing conditions in town. This analysis begins that process. It's also to say this is not done. This is still a work in progress. There's information here that Peter and Adam have yet to see. We're going to have some conversations and questions today that will drive more analysis. So this is a work in progress by all means. The first part of this workflow is we're starting with all of the parcels in town. And when we think about either what parcels, what areas does the town want to encourage development, or what is developable, it's really about removing what either isn't developable or parts of town that the town wants to sort of avoid or discourage certain types of development. So we're going to be removing parcels from this analysis. The first one, which is a fairly clear one, is to remove parcels that are within the 250-foot shoreline protection zone. Second from that, we're going to remove all completely conserved parcels. When I say completely conserved, these are parcels that are entirely permanently protected, meaning they can no longer be developed. The development rights no longer exist on parcels that are permanently protected. So we can remove those from the equation. We're also going to remove HOAs, homeowners associations. Generally speaking, there are some caveats that Adam and I have talked about, but generally speaking, those properties and lots are as developed as they will ever be. Again, there are some caveats, but that's generally true. After that, one of the broad questions that we were getting from Peter and Adam was, how many lots in town, how many properties in town conform or don't conform to minimum lot requirements? We don't know that. We will by the end of today. So that was the question that's driving this part of the analysis. These are 4 steps. I'm going to do my best to walk us through and give you just a ton of detail. I'll do my best not to get too detailed unless anyone wants to. So I'll do my best to walk us through these four items. So again, we have all the parcels in town. Our first step here is to remove parcels within that 250-foot shoreline protection zone. That zone is visible now in pink. That is the 250-foot distance around those particular bodies of water. If we identify the parcels that touch that zone in pink, it looks like this. Now, there are some big parcels that touch the boundary, that touch that 250-foot zone. In theory, we are pulling those out of the equation. So when we do that, we get, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Before we remove those, I thought it was helpful to get some basic information about those parcels that are in that 250-foot zone. So when we look at the different land uses of the parcels that touch that 250-foot zone, there's 585 parcels. That's almost a quarter of all parcels in town. The vast majority of those are single-family residential. So almost 90% of those parcels are single-family residential. The average lot size of those parcels, the average is 5.6 acres, but the median is 1.2. So the vast majority are pretty small parcels, a little over an acre. Of those single-family residential parcels, of that 90% or so, the average building area, the average size of a single-family home in this zone, trying to read it on with my own eyes, is 3,200 square feet. I'm going to key in on that number, 3,200 square feet, and think about how that relates to some national averages. So let me pause for a second. The national average size of a single-family residence is 2,100 square feet, a little over than 2,100. The New Hampshire average, the state average of a single-family home, is about 1,900, a little over 1,900 square feet. So when we look back at that number, 3,214 for single-family residences in that 250-foot shoreline zone, 47% larger than the national average and 62% larger than the state average. So those are the parcels. We're now going to remove them from the equation, and we're left with this. The second piece of this was to we just looked at some detailed information about parcels in that 250 zone. Now let's look at some similar information for parcels not in the 250-foot zone. So there's 2,200 total parcels. The average size is 4.6 acres. The median is about 1.5 acres. So again, the vast majority are pretty small, about an acre and a half. The average size of a single-family home outside of the 250-foot zone is 2,971 square feet, so just shy of 3,000 square feet. So smaller on average than homes inside the 250-foot shoreline zone. When again we compare those national and state averages, 40% larger than the national average, 54% larger than the state average. The next piece is we're going to look at parcels that are 100% or fully permanently protected. Those are outlined there in green. Again, these are entirely protected. There are other parcels that are partially conserved, meaning only a percentage of the parcel is conserved, which means it is still available. The remaining part that is not conserved can still technically be developed. So we did not include those in this process. So these are 100% permanently protected and can no longer be developed. Before I remove them, just for some, it's a little hard to see. I apologies for making it bigger, or apologies for Adam not having the screen closer to us. About 22% of the land acres in town is conserved. 22%. If we look at the surrounding towns, the average amount of land acres conserved is about 25%. So New London's about average, a little bit below average in terms of protected land. You can see the largest town with the most amount of protected land is Springfield with 41%. That is a really high number. A really high number. I've looked at a lot of towns, 41% is really high. 22%, that's about average, from my experience doing a lot of these types of analyses. But that's where New London sits relative to its neighbors. If we remove those parcels from the equation, we're left with this. The next piece is to identify and then remove the HOAs. So thanks to Adam, we've identified the HOAs. We remove those from the equation, and we're left with this. So this is really the remaining sort of available properties, available lots that could be further developed. With that said, we are next going to look at minimum lot requirements across town, across the different zoning districts. Before I get into some of the numbers, I just want to show you what these districts look like and also show you of these remaining parcels, where are they in the particular zones. So here we have the R1, the urban residential zone. That's the zone outlined in black and all of the associated available parcels in green. We have the R2 residential district and all of the available parcels. We have the ARR, agricultural and rural residential. We have the commercial, the conservation zone, and the forest zone. There is an institutional zone. It's really small. There's very little in it. So I focused on these 6. I don't expect you to see all the maps up there. It's just for some additional perspective. I'm now going to look at the numbers of these. So really, I want us to be keying in on the numbers associated with these particular zones, not necessarily what they might look like up on the top. Boy, I should have made these numbers bigger for myself. If we're looking at the R1 district, the total lots before I started doing this analysis, the total lots in that zone was 302. So there were 302 total parcels in that zone or connected to that zone before we did any analysis. Once we started removing those items that we've already walked through, the remaining available parcels are 234, so 77, almost, more than 3/4 of that zone, the parcels in that zone, are still available.
When he says available, it doesn't mean that they're not available.
That's correct. That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you. It means, I'm going to go back to, bear with me for 1 second. Back to this. These are the quote-unquote available remaining parcels. Most of these are likely developed, but they have the potential to be further developed.
Right. And some might be undeveloped and could be developed.
That's correct.
Could be both. That's in play somehow.
That's correct. So the minimum lot size in the R1 is 10,000 square feet. That's a density number. So we're looking at 10,000 square feet for a minimum lot size. When we look at the number of lots that conform to that, the vast majority do. So 94% of those lots do conform to that minimum 10,000 square feet, which leaves 6% that do not conform. Of those that conform, so of that 94% that are conforming, excuse me, if we look at lots that could still be subdividable and still meet that minimum lot requirement, now we're looking at lots that have a minimum of 20,000 square feet. So double the minimum lot size. So if you have one lot that's 20,000 square feet, it can be subdivided once into two 10,000 square foot lots. So the bottom section here are number of subdividable lots that conform. So 71% of the lots that conform can still be subdivided.
It also needs to be pointed out, that's with other conditions being set aside, such as, we didn't include whether it has frontage or wetlands, or, so there are other conditions that would limit its use.
That's correct.
Right, okay.
That's correct. And we can look at those things, that's, but that's correct. So broadly, yeah.
But the R1, so those lots all have town water and town sewer.
That's an Adam question.
Can I have the microphone, Peter?
Yes, sorry.
The vast majority do. However, there are some in R1 that do not, but they're held to really the same standard as R2. So there's a sort of separate designation of R1 without water and sewer, but it's a very small number.
Given the issues with the water precinct, the other condition would be, it may be on town water, but they may not have water.
Yeah, and we've talked about trying to get some of the water data. I think it's a hard nut to crack. So, if we can go into further detail about identifying which parcels have municipal water or have water available at the lot, at the property, we would. Do you have anything else to add to that?
I would say I think that what Steve's saying is not necessarily does the physical infrastructure exist, but does the capacity of the water supply, is it there?
I see. If we look at the R2 district, so before any analysis, there were 1,200 lots. Once we started removing all of those lots through this workflow, we're left with 424. So about a third of the lots remain. Minimum lot size in this zone is 2 acres. 51% of those lots conform to the 2-acre minimum. So a little more than half, which means 49% do not. Of those that do conform, how many could still be subdivided and still meet the minimum lot requirements? So now we're looking at a minimum of 4 acres. So it would be subdivided into 2 2-acre lots. 51% of those could still be subdivided and meet the minimum lot requirements in the R2 district. For what it's worth, the bottom number there, that's the average size of those subdividable lots. So the average size of those is 16 acres.
And it looks like there's about 110 potential lots.
Correct, that's 110, yeah.
With the same qualifier Peter said, like we haven't looked at frontage or wetness. So
That's correct. Looking at the ARR zone, the minimum lot requirement here is 4 acres. About a third of those lots do conform to that 4-acre minimum. The average size of those is 12 acres, which means 2/3 of the lots in the ARR zone do not conform. If we look at properties that do conform, that are still subdividable, that meet the minimum lot requirements, so now we're talking about 8 acres or more. There's 120 properties that meet that, 43%. The average lot size there is 21 acres. The commercial zone, minimum lot size is 5,000 square feet. Again, that's a density number, so 5,000 square feet. The vast majority of the properties in this zone do conform. So 94% of those conform to that, which means 6% do not. If we then look further at the subdividable lots that still meet, 92 properties could still be subdividable and meet that minimum lot requirement, so almost 90% do. I was going to say, it felt a little quiet. I can. Was it still working? Yeah.
So our minutes will be done by Jen from recording, so we want to make sure that they can actually.
It seems like it's going on and off, but maybe I'll just.
Once you use that one, yeah.
That's better. Okay, so I feel so loud now. In the conservation zone, let's see, we've got, the minimum lot size here is 10 acres, so less than half of those meet that minimum lot size, less than half meet the minimum lot size, which means 55% do not meet that. If we look at the subdividable lots, so now we're talking about 20 acres or more, 57% of those that conform can still be subdivided. The average size there are 39 acres. If we look at the forest zone, the minimum lot size here is 25 acres, so not surprisingly, we're getting larger properties, larger requirements. 23% meet that minimum, so almost a quarter conform, which means, almost 3/4 do not conform. When we look at, again, those that conform and can still be subdivided, so properties that are 50 acres or more, only 3 meet that. The average size, however, is 167 acres. Across all of these zones, on average, 56% of lots conform, 44% of lots do not conform. Of those that do conform, 57% on average can still be subdividable. Is there a question or?
Well, yes, but all the other conditions that come into subdividability are not applied here.
That's correct.
Okay, so it's a weird fake number to me. But I see what you're saying. I mean, if you did the right zoning changes and you did all this stuff or whatever, you could conceivably, the available maybe is the word, available
Sure.
under the right conditions.
It's
yeah.
the starting point, right? So,
That's
I mean,
right,
that's sort of the most basic test is what size is the lot?
Yeah.
And so then if you answer that we have enough land to subdivide there, then you go to what's your road frontage? And then from there, what exists for soils, wetlands, those sorts of things. So it does continue to click off. Unfortunately, from a data standpoint, we don't have broad level data to answer those things. And even from, you may have looked at the tax maps and seen road frontage on your parcel, but where that road frontage measurement is, it's really just a picture with that number. It's not actually attributed to a data table on the back end that says lot 135.52 has 253 feet of frontage. So there's not an ability to query it. So it gets somewhat complicated in that regard.
And we could, if it would be, if there's value in it, I think there is a way to pull out wetlands and other limiting factors. Yeah, we could pull out steep slopes. The frontage thing is a major challenge, but Steve, do you have something?
Yeah, and I think we talked with Peter and Adam about this. One of the challenges with starting to go to that level of detail is lots can be aggregated. So like you could put some lots together and do an open space subdivision and maybe the rules would be different. So what we're just trying to see is there still land available for development? Is it in places where you'd like to see homes in the future, which will be a question we ask later, right? And then if so, what types of homes should those be and how should they be configured? And in those areas, you may have other goals in your master plan. You may have conservation goals, wildlife habitat goals, recreation goals, and we want to make sure we're not in conflict with those things. So as much as we learn, the questions are going to get more advanced.
Yep.
And there'll be limits on what we can do, but I think if we keep asking these questions and understanding that there's a chunk of land in each of these areas that's still somehow in play if somebody chooses to develop it, and right now they can only do it under your existing rules.
Maybe,
Go ahead.
I was just going to suggest maybe it's using some words that are applicable, that ring true to what we're asking here, and maybe one word is usable or potentially developable, which means
Yeah.
we've only been able to constrain this number by the lot size in our analysis, which means it's potentially developable, but there are other conditions that will limit it. Otherwise, if the public were to hear, well, the 75% of the zone is developable, it's, wait a minute. So I think it's the wording
Yep.
that'll help to clarify that.
Yep.
Maybe that's not the right words, but we'll find them.
Yep, that's helpful. And you know, it's also pretty easy to click on, you know, a wetlands layer. I have anecdotally looked, there's not a great amount of wetlands, I don't think. And something like steep slopes, we can calculate those. We can put an overlay on this. If we're seeing broad patterns that there is clearly some major steep slopes, you know, in the northern part of town, that alone can be helpful. So we can dig into some of those things a little bit more.
Adam, do we have any information on wetlands from Conservation Commission, or?
We have wetlands layers. You know, I think certainly there are small pockets of wetlands on people's properties that probably are not mapped very well. Our streams overlay was mapped back in 2001, I think it was. So obviously that can change over time, and it's not mapped on a survey on every single parcel in town. I would say that one safeguard to this with both steep slopes and with wetlands is that those are oftentimes parcels that have already been conserved or already are in zones that have been pulled out of this, like the Forest Conservation Zone that's on the sort of ridgeline above Pleasant Lake on the Wilmette side. That is largely steep slopes, which is part of the reason why decades ago it was zoned for 25-acre lots there. And so a lot of that is already conserved. You know, it's in the Webb Forest Preserve, and so a lot of those components have sort of been eliminated just by other tests. Of course, there's going to be independent lots that have a house and a wetland, but I think a lot of the really conflicting areas have come out. Low Plain, for example, huge wetland, taken out as a conserved parcel.
So that's the workflow up to this point, and that's as much as Peter and Adam have seen as well. The next sort of piece to this that I got curious about was average home sizes in different zones, single-family and multifamily lots. Particularly interested in the single families, because the multifamilies, it's a challenge to really compare. But I got curious about the size of single-family homes in these particular zones. So if we go back to a similar looking table here, I'm going to start on the R1, that urban residential zone. And the boxes in the yellowish are single family, boxes in the blue are multifamily. The number of single family lots that are still potentially developable, there's 191. So 82% of the, where's my cursor? 234 are single-family residential. The average building size of those single-family lots is a little over 2,600 square feet. I do include multifamilies here. The biggest reason I'm including these is really to show you the percentage. So there's 19 parcels in that zone that are multifamily residential. I'm less worried about the size of those because it's hard to parse that out much further. But I thought it was important to see the percentage of those relative to single family. If we look at the R2 district, about 89, almost 90% of those potentially developable parcels are single families. The average size of a home there is just shy of 3,000 square feet, so 2,971 square feet.
One point I just want to make before we go too far too. In this case, I mean, we typically talk about multifamily as 3 units or more, but in this case, the first threshold is single family. Multifamily encompasses the duplexes.
That's correct.
Which R1, obviously, duplexes are allowed by right. So the 19 there doesn't necessarily mean that there are 19 three families, which would be legal non-conforming. Most of those are duplexes.
That's correct. So when I say multi, it's 2 and over. Yep. Looking at the ARR zone, again, almost 90% of those parcels that are potentially developable are single-family. Average size of a house there is 3,300 square feet, just over 3,300 square feet. The commercial zone, much smaller percentage are single-family, so 17% of those potentially developable lots are single-family. Average size of the home is 2,100 square feet, almost 2,200. The conservation zone, 3/4 of those potentially developable are single-family. The average size of a home is over 3,400 square feet. And there are no multifamilies in that zone. In the forest zone, 84% of the potentially developable properties are single-family. The average size of a home is almost 3,400 square feet. And again, no multifamilies. Not surprisingly, one more slide. On average, the average single-family single-family home here is just shy of 3,000 square feet. Not surprisingly, let's look at how these compare to national and state averages. They are all above. It's a little hard to see, my apologies. The commercial zone is the closest to the national and state at 3% higher than the national, 13% higher than the state, but the rest of them are significantly larger. On average, across all those zones, single-family homes are 41% larger than the national average and 55% larger than the state average. I might pause there for just a second.
Yeah, can you go back to the big table with all the, yeah, keep going back, please, if you would.
That one?
I want to make sure I understand this.
Yep.
So just for example, in the I'm sorry, I'm a little slow on some of these numbers.
No, there's a lot of numbers up there. I get it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I apologize. So in the R1, for example, I'm seeing 82% of the lots in the R1 district have single-family homes on them.
So it's 82% of this number.
Which
So
is, so there are
those are the
234 available potentially developable lots.
Correct.
Some of
that-
those may have houses on them,
That's correct.
and 82% is the one that has houses on them.
That's correct.
So
82%
18
have a single family.
Single family, okay. So approximately 18% are not being used. Is that right?
8% are multifamily, and then there's a smattering of other percentages that might have some other use.
Oh, so 82 and 8 is 90, so about 10%
10%
would
have
be
some other
unused? Or some other use? Okay.
So
Okay.
commercial, agricultural, there could be any number of other uses.
Okay. You see what I'm trying to,
Yep.
and I'm not using the numbers correctly. Thank you.
Yep.
Zach, question about the size of the structure? Jeez. Question about the size of the structure?
Yeah.
Does that include the garages, the square footage?
It does not, so that's effective building area. If we include the entire building area, so effective building area is really living space. If we include the entire building area, these numbers are much larger. And I don't have, yeah,
Correct. No, I'm just curious because I didn't know if you included them because some of these garages have bedrooms or what over them.
yep. And so again,
But if it
that's,
has a bedroom over it, that would be tempered effective space, right?
that would be included in the effective building area.
Right.
Yep. If it's livable space, it's effective building area, and those are the numbers I've used here.
So Amy and I were having a side conversation. No, I think these are a lot of numbers. It's a little bit overwhelming. I think Adam, Peter, Liz, and myself have been lucky to have more time with Zach and to see this grow. You just had last month than you have today. part of the reason I think for showing the level of detail that Zach's showing tonight is so that you can understand the methodology used and you can speak up, as Adam and Peter have, when either we've made a mistake, which we've made some mistakes and we've had to address them, and because they understand the local context, they've been able to ask follow-up questions as you can. The intent isn't necessarily to drag every townsperson through this process the way that the commission goes through, but it's to get to a point where you trust the process that we're using and we can carefully talk about things like, are available, potentially available for development, and we can phrase it accurately. But to kind of create little profiles of either topics or of areas of town that we can say, here's what we do know. There is potential for more development. Here's some stats that we have about the types of homes that are here. And it's not to pass judgment in any way, but to just say, okay, now that we know that, what do we think are our concerns going forward? What are our opportunities? What do we want to do about it? And you might decide to do very little. You might decide to try a bunch of different things. But without knowing it, we were all kind of like, well, what is even happening in New London? This is telling us what's happening. So I think it would be easy for people to misunderstand some of the data, and that's not what we want to do. And so by slowly bringing people up to speed with this stuff in November and providing the data so that they can look at it and ask questions and having feedback forms and having these meetings, which are open and luckily people attend, having conversations about this, knowing that you're taking a long view of a year or two to start to bring anything forward was really the intent. I just want to make sure everyone here is comfortable with that and knows at any point you can ask for more information, but also you can ask for less. You can ask us to boil it down, which is what we're going to have to do for the public, and we recognize that.
Yeah.
Any other
I have one
comments,
more.
thoughts, questions?
I have one more question.
Yes.
Of the, let's say, the R2 district, the developable land, that has excluded all of the areas that you've excluded, the waterfront, I don't even remember all the
Yep.
parts, but so that's just strictly what land is now usable.
That's
You've
correct.
taken those things out.
Yep.
Can you speak up?
It may or may not have a house already on it. Yeah, okay, just making sure, because
I've
that
got
can be, some people could just not know that.
No, but I'm looking at the sizes of the houses.
Yes.
Thinking how small a house I have.
Right.
That much less to keep clean.
And maybe there's value in because I can pull out properties that do not have any structure.
That's what I was going to ask.
So if we could make a note of that, that might be,
That would,
yeah.
that would really,
Yeah.
yeah, that would be very realistic
Yeah.
for people to understand that it isn't that number.
Yep,
And it would just be interesting to see that information overlaid. with what
Right.
we already have.
yep.
Right.
Yeah, very much so.
I will say anecdotally, of all the properties that are listed as single-family residential, on average, most of them already have a house. Not all, by no means, but yeah.
But
having that
But
number.
that's why I'm asking.
That's right, that's exactly
Because it's
right.
very misleading.
Yep,
And we just can't have that.
yep.
I think in knowing, even if it's a high percentage, if there's the potential that person could subdivide that lot, that's part of the story. They
That's
may
right.
never. Right, yeah,
It's a potential.
yeah.
And one might say that a property that has, I don't know, maybe it's going too far, that a property that has no development, has no structure, is that more likely to be developed, or is a property that already has a structure more likely to be subdivided? I don't know. But having that number, I think, would be helpful.
Why don't we quickly offer some discussion with the members of the public? Do you have any questions or comments? Or there's been a lot thrown out here, and we're massaging it and listening. Any thoughts you want to share?
I had just one more question.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Amy.
I noticed in the towns that were listed on the right-hand side, a few slides back, those were towns, surrounding towns, but Bradford was not one of them. So I'm just, you may have left Bradford out for a reason, but just trying to cover that base because people in this area know that Bradford is part of the area. It is part of the school district. So.
Does it abut? That's why.
Well, it's...
That's why, yep. I can make sure to include it.
Wait, so it's not contiguous, oh, you mean Newbury comes before it, down where, okay, my bad.
If there's value in having it, it's easy to do. It's relatively easy to do. So I just took the towns that abut New London.
Okay.
But I can certainly include it, yeah.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Yep.
Yes, Mike, with a microphone, please, if you would, because we're going to do minutes, so thank you. And identify yourself, too, if you would, please.
Yeah, Mike Liberty, New London resident. I live over on Brookside Drive, Trussell Ridge. I do think the commission's focus on intuitive language is critically important because the attention span of folks on this issue is going to be really, short, and we just want to make sure that there's not a immediate knee-jerk reaction due to misunderstanding of the language. So, yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. Point well taken. We're trying to be very sensitive to that. It's easy when a bunch of numbers are out there to grasp some of them incorrectly and then have a knee-jerk reaction. Karen, yes, please.
Karen Epstein. I guess the question, this came up tangentially, and I'm not sure how it gets included in the process, but that is in regard to the water precinct and the capacity constraints, challenges. How do you see grappling with that in terms of potential for development within the precinct? I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on how you're approaching that.
I would suggest that's a process that's out of our control. We can't measure it because it's out of our control. We can attend meetings and listen to what's being done and what's being suggested that is planned to be done by others in the future, but it's pretty hard for us to quantify that. It certainly is something for us to monitor and pay attention to, and I think certainly I am, and I know a lot of us are very, very diligently, but it's hard to incorporate that in a study like this because it's out of our control, and it's also difficult to get real data, as you've heard earlier.
Peter, if I could just add for Karen, the fact that there are questions around it, I think when we get to the second phase, when we're looking at what types of housing and like where in the community would there be potential for housing, we're going to have to note those questions and that concern, and that might be something that you would wait until that's resolved before you would proceed with some of the alternatives, or it might help rule out some choices about density. So I think it'll come into play to whatever degree we can make sense of it, but as Peter said, we just don't have enough data to be 100% sure.
And Karen, I think in a lot of ways, this process will help educate any of the utilities for what the potential need may be down the road. So whether it's water, sewer, public utility needing to change the phase of the power, whatever it may be, if this process says this is the area of town we're focused on and this is what we see being there for development, all of those different service providers will have to take that into account. So it's not just what exists today for capacity in all of those utilities, because honestly, the findings of this will hopefully go on for decades in the future, that the build out is not something that is intended to take place in the next 10 to 20 years that a utility's capacity may be focused on. And so hopefully with the findings from this would work as resources for all of those providers as well.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Do you have follow-up?
I've got just a few more slides here, because what I wanted to do now was to try to bring some sort of regional context to this. So the acronym to end all acronyms, the UVLSRHNA, Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Housing Needs Assessment, came out 2023. It's an impressive document. I wanted to just pull out three little items that I think will help us both understand these types of issues and take some of the information, all those numbers that we just ran through, and give it a little bit more context regionally. I wanted to look at population change, households, and housing stock. Population change, I don't have, the thing I wanted to pull out here is, you can see New London down here. Since 2000 to 2020, New London's population has increased almost 7%. Now, the piece I think is worth looking at here really are the surrounding towns that have increased on average about 28%. So although New London's population has increased a relatively modest 7%, the average surrounding towns, at least those that you can see, I've got Springfield, Wilmot, Sunapee, and Newbury, have all increased an average of about 28%. So it's something to be aware of for New London.
And that's 20 years, Zach.
That's 20 years, yeah, you can't see it there, sorry. 2000 to 2020. And, yeah, 20 years. There's some text that I've just pulled out directly from this report. The items in bold, I think, are worth just reading. Household sizes has been shrinking, and that's a trend that is expected to continue across the region. So that's number of people in a household. The aging population of the region and shrinking household sizes demonstrate that large, single-family homes increasingly do not address the needs of the region. So relative to some of the data that we were just looking at, I think it was some important contextual addition that this needs assessment, housing assessment, was done less than a year ago. Looking at the housing stock, the size and type of available homes in the region varies greatly, so town to town. The most common housing unit size is between 2 and 3 bedrooms, and that's consistent across all towns. Since 2010, the number of, I'm mostly interested in 2, 4, and 5 bedroom homes has risen. So we just heard that household size is decreasing. Here we're seeing size of homes are increasing, despite the most common ones. This is the bedroom count over time. So you can see 3 bedrooms is dropping. That's despite 3 bedrooms being the most common. So there are fewer 3 bedrooms. 2, 4s, and 5s are on the rise. The bottom line in bold, according to the survey conducted as part of this report, types of homes available was the second most common variable that impacts a resident's ability to stay within their community. Second only to affordability. So when New London is thinking about either keeping people here or attracting people and then keeping them here, having a variety of homes could be valuable. Sorry, that's, again, covered. This is the distribution of housing types. So on the left, I don't know how to get rid of that, the pin button. Thank you. I don't have numbers here. The report didn't have numbers, it just had the pie graph, the pie chart on the left. We've got the distribution of single-family and multifamily units regionally. So in my opinion, it looks like maybe 70% single-family to 30% multifamily. In New London, it's quite a bit different. The vast majority are single-family with much fewer multifamilies. And so, with that, I'm sure the brains are on empty and wanted to, again, pause and open it up for questions and comments.
I would just add quickly, these are in the communities within the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission territory.
That's correct.
Which includes Newport and Lebanon.
That's
and
correct.
Claremont.
That's correct.
So I'm not disagreeing with a general conclusion as to number of multifamily in New London, but you have to consider those municipalities are included.
Yep, absolutely. And there is language to say that most of them, I'd have to go back. I should hold that back to myself. But you're right.
So I have a question. One of the things I've often thought about is the age of the housing stock an important variable?
I think so in terms
I
of,
think so, too.
of size and number of bedrooms.
Yeah.
And I think the older you go, and you look at our own neighborhoods, the, Barrett Road neighborhood, which I know is home for you, you look at the modest ranches and sort of the bread and butter homes in that area, and then you look at the newer homes, and it's a stark contrast between what it is. And it's, seeing the building permits come through my office, what we're continually seeing are when those homes come on the market, they're bought at pretty reasonable prices. I mean, still high, but on New London terms, pretty reasonable. And then they are having a significant amount of money invested in them.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. It sort of takes them and moves them into alignment with the rest of the community.
But I'm also thinking, just an observation, it appears that a lot of rural homes are old and falling down. I just don't know what impact that has on the overall housing picture. Just a comment.
And I don't know, Adam, I can't remember off the top of my head. Do you know if that data has the age of the home?
It does.
So we can look at that if we think there's value.
It does. If there's been a significant renovation, I think the original age still stays there. I can ask Chris McAllister. Okay.
So one of the things, I think one of the places it might come into play, Nancy, is that some of the information Eric's looking at is cost burdening. So like how many of your households are paying more than 30% of their monthly income for housing. And if you take an older home that's now more expensive than you can afford, it may be too big for you, and now it's also poorly insulated, and your fuel, heating costs are up, like it becomes unworkable. And so then there's a lack of interest in some of those homes, or something has to change and it has to be able to be reconfigured in a thoughtful way. So like, I think it's all in play.
Rich, we're recording, so if you would, please just use that microphone. Thank you. And identify yourself, please. Thank you.
Rich Epstein, resident. The latest thing that you presented, was that just extracts from some reports? And so I guess, is there ways is it on the town website that we can look at and look at it?
The answer is yes, and we actually discussed it at a Housing Commission meeting, and it is available, Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission.
Okay.
And it's on their webpage. Is this in Keys to the Valley? They have a subpage called Keys to the Valley.
Okay.
And it's all kind of data in that webpage, but check Keys to the Valley and also just look for housing needs assessment, and it's there.
Yeah.
It's big. I've got
Yeah,
a
it's
3-ring
big.
notebook. It's about 2 inches thick.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But and there's there's a lot of information in there, and the bits that I read, they're pretty interesting.
Okay.
So yeah, it's worth taking a look at, and it's easy to find. It's on there somewhere.
Okay. And I just had a thought on one of the things you said, because I think you were showing how much a small increase in population New London had versus some, we had 7%, where others had 20-something percent. Now, I remember there's a report from New Hampshire Housing, I think, showed we're the 4th most dense town in the region. So it would, to some degree, I would think, be logical that we wouldn't increase when we're already so dense compared. So a lot of these towns might have increased 20-some odd percent, but they're probably less dense than New London is now. Just a thought.
Yep. Sure, worth keeping in mind. Yeah.
Rich, I'm particularly interested in getting my arms around that 4th most dense statistic. And so maybe you and I can talk offline.
Sure.
I'd like to understand how that approach was taken, because that's a factor about land use that's important to get our arms around. So
I got it from the state.
Great. Great. I'll follow up with you if that's
Sure.
okay.
I'm also curious about that.
Yeah. Super. Thank you. Anybody else? We're running out of time, but
Just the last comment, I think
Yes,
that
please.
a greater variable on that, looking at people in Springfield and whatever, and the growth, it's based on the cost of the housing.
Right.
That's where people went.
yeah.
We don't have the house.
Right.
That's why we're not.
People can't afford it.
Right.
People don't
Right.
want to come here because we don't have the housing.
Natural conclusion.
If we had it, they couldn't
They
afford
can't
it.
afford it. Exactly.
That's why we're here. Terrific. I'd like to keep moving. I try to stick to an hour and a half, and we're running over. So let's quickly, Adam, do you have any current updates on housing developments and water precinct?
I mean, I'm sure you're all hearing various rumors and things in the last couple of days. I don't think I really have anything publicly to share at this point. The town is still learning about the updated water supply for the two new developments too. But I would say just sort of stay tuned on that front.
Okay. Very good, then. We've been through public comment, but let me offer one last time, since it's on that place in our agenda. Lastly is future meetings. You'll see quite a few posted on the agenda, and I'm going to give you a handout because it's sort of a reminder of what we'll be doing with these time frames. There you go. Thank you.
Peter, if you want me to speak to any of these, I'm happy to.
Yeah, why don't you do that? That'd be great.
Sure.
What I did was I just captured those and put them on a standalone page because simplicity is easier for me to absorb information.
And Ethan, if you wouldn't mind handing these out. No, we have the rest. We have a bunch here. Yep, can you grab one more from Liz? So this
more
is
over
this is the schedule we've put out for, as Zach showed earlier, kind of the remaining task in this first phase. So we're hoping to meet with you again in August. We'll have another coordination meeting with Peter and Adam, and what we'll do is show you a refined kind of like, these are some of the things that are coming out, both from the existing questions you had and kind of the next iteration of Zach's work. And we want to talk, we'll spend more time talking specifically about the steps we need to take to get to that speaker series and make sure people show up and they join us for that. So there'll be, as Liz was talking about, you'll see drafts of materials now that we have a logo and a name. So that'll be a big focus of that meeting on the 20th. There's a possibility that there'll be some things we'll want to clarify on September 11th, but the focus might really be on getting the word out creatively. And so we'll work on that for September. We've gotten confirmation that Eric Halverson from RKG will be getting a draft report out to Peter and Adam initially to make sure there aren't any big errors. We don't want to have you reading something if we've missed something important. And then out to you ahead of a meeting on the 23rd. And then he'll be here in person. And he'll actually do like Zach does. He'll go over and just tell you snapshots on housing and population and the local economy. He'll answer questions. He'll take your additional ideas and questions. It'll be draft. It'll stay draft. He can then revise any material that he would present at the speaker session in November. But we want to make sure that the commission gets to see the information, that you're comfortable with it, and that others that have been participating can come here and get a preview and have a sense for the combined event that we're creating for November, where we're going to get like a synopsis of the work that Zach's been helping you all with and the synopsis of Eric's work. And Liz has some really creative ideas about how to weave those together. So it's not just, two individuals presenting. So we're working on that, and we'll share those ideas with you. And then it sounds like we're on for the 13th for the speaker series, which is great. So that'll keep some momentum all the way to that point.
Thoughts, questions?
I know you were going to, Twin Pines, you don't have an update on that?
Nothing to share right now.
So whatever I know is just rumor?
Sure.
Okay.
I don't know what you know, so I don't know if I can tell you if it's
That they
rumor.
were successful
But
in their finding of water.
I would say that was accurate as of a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
Sounds like a lot going on. We'll have to wait. Yeah. But I'm guessing these are very complex matters too, so that's,
But they're putting that word out there.
I don't know, but
I'm just letting you know.
good.
As a citizen, they're putting that word out there. That they're
Twin-
that they will be running their tests on the new places where that's all I'm letting you know.
Good. Okay, well, we'll hope more information on that later. So schedule is exciting and content is building. I should have thanked you, Zach, for your work. I was pushing along on the schedule, but that's terrific. I have one quick question. will there be another, I guess your work, Zach, on the GIS study will be sort of an ongoing, informing sort of data source for us, correct? There isn't going to be sort of a conclusion because it's the sort of resource we can keep querying, is that correct?
That's correct. And the goal here is to take things like this and whittle them down, continue the conversations, continue the analysis, and be prepared for November 13th to have a really concise, framing and communication of these things alongside Eric with RKG. So this was much more detailed than we would ever do at a public meeting, a forum, yeah.
Great.
But I think, keep in mind, after the 13th, Zach doesn't go away, neither does the tool. So if we start to say, well, what if you allow duplexes in other zones, and you want to look at that, we would need some inputs, and it would be an estimate, and it's not a build-out, but it would start to give us a sense of, could you do it? You know, could you do an open space subdivision? Could you do a cottage court? Whatever these things are that might come up, and you want to play around with it, we'll challenge Zach to see if he can help us see what the impact would be, or maybe where you'd run into challenges. So it's a constant tool.
Mr. Wizard, thank you. Thank you very much for that. So with that being said, I'm sorry for running over time, but there's a lot of meat here. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. It's been seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you. Well done.